haven't really figured out how to start this show, so I'm just gonna start the recording button now. So we're recording right now. I know this isn't professional, but it is what it is. I'm trying to figure this shit out.
Yeah, we are just having a fun one.
Yes. Today we are going to be talking about V5 and whether or not it is viable yet, what it might look like for the future, and why it might be worth testing in the now to see what needs to happen versus what could happen. Where I think is interesting to go from here first, though, is to introduce ourselves. So I am the voice of Steve. You are either seeing this on my channel or on the Enduring the Struggle podcast page. And with me today is
Jan. I'm really new to maybe half a year right now. And yeah, that's so much.
And Jan has been a pleasure to get to game with, to get to hear some thoughts and ideas from, to get to hear a different perspective on the game from. Because I feel like sometimes I miss that. I have been playing this game for probably, God, sometimes it feels like 30 years, but it's really been like 25 years. And it's always interesting to like get a perspective from somebody who is newer to the game or new-ish to the game. Because I feel like even if you've been in the game for 2 or 3 years, there's not like a lot of rookie left to it. I've said this before, and I do mean this. Like, if this is the kind of game that you like, it doesn't take long to sort of find mastery in it, or at least a near mastery in it when you get to that point. But it is a game with a very high cliff that you have to climb to kind of get to that. And so to hear like some of the thoughts and opinions you've had, Jan, they are really, really great to get the experience of, like your vision of Fall of London. So I think, and actually real quick, I want a little tiny update here. How are you feeling about Fall of London now?
I was, as you recall, excited about maybe the Goblet would offer a different alternative win condition. It hasn't been quite steep, but still I feel like there are cards I can try to do something. Like from my Nosferatu Creeping Sabotages, Daria is a good addition worth considering, as well as Oscar, and I had even thoughts about the Guardian. Mm-hmm. And for the marks I'm playing, Abraham is quite great. So in total, I would summarize it. My thought that it was story related just was true. Maybe not in the way it was thought, but still, I feel this is okay. This is fine. I would even try to play a storyline event. Mm-hmm. And still, there are some also worth considering for usual decks. So not the super exciting thing, but still a cool addition.
Yeah, I think it's nice to hear you have that feeling tempered, not in like the mean way. It felt to me like maybe I'm missing something, and you actually did. You got me to go back over some of the set and kind of try to look at the set with a slightly different sort of vision of it. And I think some of that was actually successful. I don't think the set is as mediocre as I felt like it was, but I still feel very disappointed by the set. And I think to sort of condense what I feel like I was the most disappointed by is the cards that felt like they should have been the really punchy cards, or the cards that you really wanted to see, ended up being cards that were just kind of meh cards. And while I think the set is full of really great and unique vampires that are a really nice addition to the game, it's not enough vampires. And then the other cards are just kind of, we got some allies, we got some equipment that's not great, we got a location that's all right, but there's just a lot of pool cost attached to a lot of those things that didn't need to have a pool cost.
I think there is a rule change coming towards it.
Yes.
Depending on how this goes, it might change the perception of the allies.
I don't think it's going to. I think that even in a vacuum, the allies that were printed right now are just, I mean, you can maybe say the non-unique one is the closest one to playable. The other two, well, I feel like the guy that searches up equipment isn't completely and totally belonging of being in a dumpster fire. I definitely don't feel that card costs the right amount for how little it does. And the other one, I forget her name, but she is
Valerie Diaz.
Yeah, she is like destined to be the part of the deck where you're like, oh, I need cards to proxy with. Let me use Valerie for a proxy slot. I think you changed my opinion. You brought up my opinion a little bit about the overall set, but I also think that it's still in kind of a I wanted more, and I think I personally have my expectations set a little too high. And I think that you being newer had like this great perspective of like, whatever comes out is what comes out. Like, I'm going to enjoy more content regardless.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of an interesting thing that brings us into like why the V5 set is an interesting, or why a V5 format is an interesting thing and where it can go and what it can do. Because for you, this is just new cards printed that you get an opportunity to play with in paper. Because let's face it, there is a problem when it comes to getting all the cards that you want for VTES.
Yes, there is. I mean, I wouldn't even bother about the Revolutionary Council. Yeah, just I had some nice ideas and I dropped them because it is so hard to get the right card. I mean, you could proxy them, but then again, I am a person who likes to have the actual card.
Yeah.
And if I do have something, I like to have the full set. So from a collecting perspective, even though you could play proxies, it's hard. And second, which is a major point for me, it's hard to know all cards which are somewhere out there. And for the V5 format, a card pool I can overlook somewhat right now. I can do something within that. And yeah, so it's easier to be creative if you know the cards. It's not just like knowing you have 400 cards and it's a 10th what's even out there to know it to build a good, reliable deck.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you from that perspective. So I do think that having a smaller card pool is beneficial to new players. It's an obviously great introductory way to bring somebody in. I think that over time we run back into the same scenario where we'll print enough cards that it will again have that barrier. I think if we look at other card games, Magic being obviously the biggest one, so the easiest one to reference, it keeps having to create new quasi-legacy formats in their system. So they have at this point like 7 formats. Arena, which has its own, all the cards that were ever printed in it. You have Pioneer, which is everything from M20 forward or M21 or whatever that set was forward. You have extended, or not extended. You have modern, you have legacy, you have pre-modern, and you have the other set that has like a weird boundary.
I think traditional.
That's standard. Standard is maybe I didn't mention standard in there, but there's a lot of like formats that play in the base style of the game, and then you have your like different style formats, your things like Pauper, Commander, etc. And all these formats are designed for different players. Go ahead.
But I would make a distinction between Magic or the amount of card pool, because right now one of the hard things is that there are so many disciplines. I mean, which I should know. I mean, if somebody, for example, plays Salubri, they could play Valorant and they could play Obea.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would need to know, and Salubri are rarely played.
Right.
So it's hard to know, okay, which Valorant cards are there and which Obea cards are there and what is their main purpose.
Yeah.
So I feel like with the reduced, I can easier sort cards into categories. Presence, bleed, and vote, for example, and dominate, bleed, mainly, deflection. So it's easier to get a hold of, see a deck, even with more new cards, that you can just get a hang of, maybe not all mechanics, but an idea what the deck is trying to do.
Okay, I'll say that I agree with that. I do think that the discipline pool, and I know this is going to get a lot of flack from a lot of people, but I do feel like, well, I liked a lot of the specialty disciplines. A lot of the discipline pool was full of either disciplines that when you played they were really good, or disciplines that when you played you were kind of like, it doesn't have enough cards to be a full discipline. Like, I feel like if we go to like the Tzimisce, for example, the Tzimisce as they stand right now, Vicissitude, it feels like an unfinished discipline. It has a lot of neat cards in it, but there's a lot of stuff that, like, I think, I'm going to put it this way, if/when they get their new array of disciplines, including Protean, it really feels more like a finished discipline. And with whatever they're going to get for their multimodal cards, not multi-discipline clan-specific cards, I think that is going to be a better way to introduce those things, even if I don't I don't like it from a flavor perspective.
Yeah.
The biggest reason I don't like it from a flavor perspective is I don't see why somebody from another clan can't learn vicissitude, since it like isn't necessarily strictly for them as with other of those disciplines. But I will agree from a game perspective, having the added disciplines that really feel functionless is just, it's kind of a sad state.
Yeah, and again, I think one could say the if you have too many choices and maybe not all choices well developed, you as a new player, you don't know. So yeah.
Have you ever played have you ever played action RPGs? This is related to what you're saying here. You ever played any action RPGs?
Like pen and paper?
No, like Diablo, like Diablo 2 or like Path of Exile or anything like that?
No.
Okay, I was going to say that has a lot of that same, like, you come in and get sort of choice paralysis within a few minutes of looking at all the options because, like, holy shit, like, what do I do from here? And there's so many, like, bad options that you don't know until you play it for, like, a long period of time. I think it's what you're going for, right? Keep going, sorry.
Exactly. No, this was main point. I think Orpheus made a nice article about what to buy as a new player. And this is what I was missing, for example, as well, because I bought Keepers of the... No, not Keepers. Heirs to the Blood. Mm-hmm. Because I like Salubri, because of the flavor. And only to realize that the cards which are in there are not enough to deck off. And so again, I just have, and I bought it twice from the beginning. So I wouldn't have to worry about few of this.
Well, I think this is there's also a bit of a distribution problem as well, related to linking to that. In addition, like the Heirs to the Blood set release the re-release for the set was not great. I think the card counts in those were very poorly balanced. I think they could have done the numbering a lot better. And it was confusing because it comes in a box set and a new player's like, oh, this is going to have the things I need for what I want. And then you open up and you're like, this has like half of the things I need or less. And it's still like missing certain things. So I do agree from that perspective comment as well. I think that the game does need more things to feel like the box has what you need, instead of feeling like you're kind of guessing at the box each time you're buying. We need less stuff like the Heirs to the Blood release and more stuff probably like what they're doing with Fall of London, priced at a reasonable price point where you don't feel so bad buying multiple copies of it, and that hopefully people will recognize that they can trade with each other the vampires they don't need for the vampires they do need. We'll see if that works, because I had problems with that when I don't know if you've ever seen the Game of Thrones living card game reboot that they did. So I bought it with the intent. I bought we all got into it, and I was buying into it with the idea that like I'll get these cards and then I'll be able to trade these cards with somebody else, because I wanted to play Greyjoy and somebody else was going to play Lannisters, so we can just exchange the cards, because they would always come in a box set with like every card from the set and 3 copies, which is the max for a deck. And then like people are like, well, no, I think I want to build a Greyjoy deck now, and it's like, but why? Like,
yeah, well, I think if you can keep some copies, but if you buy it, I bought Follow 3 times, just to have enough Malkavians. No, kidding, but
half your deck, same guy.
Yeah, you don't have to trade all cards. Just some are maybe you'll have more than you need, but these you can trade off easily, and still you have enough room to say, instead of just Malkavian deck, try a new Toreador approach, because there are new cards in it, and I don't need all. Yeah, it's just you can be creative even if you give some off.
Yeah, but I feel like it's harder sometimes for people to do that. Maybe that's because I'm over here in the States and people do things a lot differently. But I would like to see more card movement. And I think that's what it's supposed to be designed for, in the way that the enumeration in the box is designed. Yeah. Part of that is because I hate waste materials. I feel like we could minimize that if we got the numbers a little bit more tightened up. But I digress on that. I could get stuck on that conversation as a whole nother thing. And it's a lot of what drove me out of Magic ultimately in a big way. So yeah, I think you've presented like good points to it, to like why it's important to look at the game from a new starting perspective and filling out what's there and trying to deal with the card pool complexities, so many cards, the lack of availability of cards. I do think there's something, going back to one of your first points, I do think there's something important to be said about playing with the physical cards as opposed to playing with proxies. I have played with proxies. They always feel a little different in the sleeve, even with the thin sheet of paper. I know, again, sensory sensitivity here, so I am not in the majority of people. I'm in the far minority of people that can feel it, but it does always feel a little different. It always looks a little different because you can never get the proxy cut perfectly. It always ends up like off in some way. So I do also think that playing with the physical card helps a lot, and I think that setting some of the printing cost off on the player is more frustrating. As I think it is better if the cards are just available for people to get what they want. And while I've seen the arguments of like, well, you can just go on eBay and get the card, you can just, they're not that difficult. There are cards that are still in the $20 to $50 range simply because there is no reprint in sight. Now, there are some cards that there are definitely reprints in sight for, but there are other cards that like are presently like don't have reprints in sight. So it's a bit difficult, and it's a bit of a gray area because I think some people who might have speculatory interests might have access to knowing that certain cards are going to reappear, and the market can modify dramatically. And if the pattern continues, it could become abused, like we saw on the Star City Games day of old for Magic the Gathering, where Star City Games players were also on the playtest list, and they were able to see what cards were coming and know how to share without sharing that information, their corporate overlord, to ensure that prices were very strange when cards would be released at $50 and heavily promoted, and then all of a sudden when the full set came out, the whole value of the card would tank because it was bad compared to all the rest of the cards printed in the set. Cool in a vacuum, bad in the set. I'm not pointing any fingers. I'm just saying this is something that should be overlooked as a side note.
I mean, I feel like for Vitas, this is not much of an issue yet. I mean, $20 or €20 is a steep price. I think, you can get a whole set for that, but still it is something which is in affordable range if you want to.
Sure. My point is that that's in an affordable range in quantum space now. We do have to look at a future of where this happens, and this is a reason that I think V5 is more of a viable set, because it starts to deflate the other values. If a V5 format does start to appear and it gets traction, this is something that happened actually as a rubber band effect. Legacy cards dropped dramatically in value for a time. While this play was happening of new sets in the modern format had come out, a lot of Legacy had sort of dropped completely. Like prices had fallen to levels that were like, if you collect, fine. So I'm in favor of it because I think it will ricochet those cards in a different direction that wouldn't otherwise happen. My worry though is if we just stick to the full format only, we stick ourselves in, well, people are going to need a copy of X card and it's not being reprinted and has no signs of being reprinted, so I can charge. And it doesn't seem like a lot. It may seem innocuous, $2 to $3 for a card. But if it happens to be a very pivotal card to a clan or to a specific deck, then it just gets stuck at that pricing, never to be changed. And I don't think that there's a lot of cards like this, but I do think there are some key cards that are in limited availability. And if somebody realizes it, we could have a very big buyout problem on our hands.
Yeah, but I can say much for the monetary issue because I have focused myself on buying what is V5 or maybe what is in print. I bought the other set. And but still, I feel like from a different perspective, or a different point for the discussion I would like to make, since we were discussing in a play group about playing a V5 format, and if so, which other cards should be a V5 plus format. And I feel like, for example, Archon. is not reprinted.
It feels pretty important to be reprinted.
No.
Yes. So
No. Well, just I was making a joke right there. So
okay.
but I think cards are more balanced than it seems only in the V5 environment.
I would agree.
And I think a lot of the cards you would think you'd need, like Wash or Sudden Reversal, Archon, whatever, or Banishment, you don't need them because in the V5 environment you have cards which do not the same, but you can find different solutions. And maybe it's okay not to have an out of turn master yet in the sets because no one has. So I think the masters are not so powerful that you would need an out of turn master just on the V5.
Well, remember we do technically have Sudden, and I think we
we do not.
Yeah, Sudden is in the First Blood Malkavian.
Yeah, exactly.
So we do have Sudden. Oh no, First Blood. I'm sorry, First Blood, not the
First Blood. Yeah.
Right. I don't like that they are all named so similar to each other.
Yes.
But I thought direct intervention, because of the promo printing, was brought into what is technically. Oh no, that promo printing hasn't happened yet. No, it's just not listed.
I don't know.
There is a promo printing for it because there was the black and white version and the full like the sketchwork version of it.
But what I want to point out is, I think the reaction I realized we were having in our playgroup, or discussion in our playgroup, was like, you all coming from a history with knowing what other cards there are, tend to look at what's missing, what do I need often, what kind I use, instead of, okay, this is my card pool, and to say if it's balanced or not, we would need only to play V5, and then you maybe realize what is missing when you have assessed the actual card pool. Because the reaction is like, I don't have all candy options available, so this is not going to be good.
Right. I think
this is not. Yeah.
I think your point is incredibly, incredibly valid there, and I want to really hammer home how, as much as I hate you're right on this particular thing, you are, because even myself, the hardest part of this is like looking at myself and seeing that like I do the same thing. I look at the card pool first and think about what don't I have, rather than looking at the card pool forward. And even when I was generating the format, I was just trying to think like, how do I fill in certain things that are missing from the card pool that seem like they would be helpful to the card pool? And well, I do think there are some ways that you and I will disagree on this. I think that Sudden is a useful card in the format. I think that Direct Intervention and Archon Investigation probably would be important cards in the format. I think that I am narrowing myself by like trying to bend the format to be what I think I want it to be, when it would be better if I just encountered the format and let it go. So I think there is room to negotiate, which is why I said in our conversation about it, I'm not necessarily sticking to it. I'd like to try to figure out where we'd land on here. And your point here is very valid, that it would be better to play with it and figure out what it is format needs, instead of assuming ahead of time what the format needs. Though I will say it is outrageously hard to get rid of equipment in the V5 plus format, because like 60% of the cards that get rid of equipment don't exist at all.
Yeah, but then again, how much equipment is there right
Heart
now?
of Cheating.
Yeah, I can get that with Darius.
Yeah, lots. The problem is the ease at which you can get a Heart of Cheating and keep it for a very long time, which I personally feel like is more of my feeling there is a problem I've had from having played against that card many, many years ago, when that card was very dominant. It was very hard to outpace somebody who was seeing 3 new cards every turn and, dropping away the worst parts of their hand over and over again. Go ahead.
The question is if this is an issue if V5 only.
Yeah.
Because the fewer unique equipment there is, and I think Ivory Bow is unique.
Ivory Bow is unique, yes.
Heart is unique. What do we have for it?
Yeah, I'll pull it up real quick. Hold on. So if we just do the what is it we were doing? If we do like 5th edition plus, right? 5th edition or newer, get it, and then I can do equipment. So yeah, we've got Bowl of Convergence is unique. Codex of the Endemic Groundskeeper is unique. I didn't even realize reprinted. That shows how little I know there. Flaming Candle was reprinted, but not unique. Heart is unique. Ivory Bow is unique. The rest of it, yeah, there's not a lot. There's 44 otherwise, Kevlar vest, sniper rifle, sports bike, and yeah, so very minimal equipment list in V5.
So, and some of them are unique. So if a lot of people play them, they get contests. And, maybe the chance for the contest is more likely to happen because of the limited card pool. And there's Conceal as well.
I believe Conceal is still in the format.
Yeah, it is. It's in new.
Yep, okay. Wait,
So,
I don't know. No, you mean the card Conceal, not Concealed Weapon.
Yeah.
Speak Disguise.
So I think, again, this is a reflex you do have because of your experience playing a card so many times. And the question is, would it be as dominant in V5? Because everybody can play it, can contest it the whole time, and there are still some burn-off.
So my biggest fear here is, like, the contest option seems relevant, but it does make a card like Magic of the Smith a lot more powerful, because Magic gives you the opportunity to get some of these key cards, and annoyingly, the key cards that exist there that are equipment are probably two of the more powerful pieces of equipment that can exist that you could get with Magic of the Smith. So, for example, somebody getting to start with a Bowl of Convergence and a Heart of Cheating because they can go Magic of the Smith seems really strong comparatively, and in a deck that would already be really strong because you're going to be working with. I'm verifying some things while I do this, so give me a moment if I pause to confirm the existence of certain cards. But you are in an environment that still has like Mirror Walk to back you up in getting that action to occur. I think it's even more powerful that these cards are also in a deck that I think would be one of the most dominant decks just looking at the way the format is, which is the Banyu Hakim deck. I think if we're going to talk in this realm, we should talk about where it looks like the key power players are going to emerge. So to me, the three biggest decks are the Banyu Hakim deck. They are the
Ministry.
Ministry. I think Ministry is another one. I think that to some lesser extent, Bruja might be. I think the Bruja Anarch large, like high defense, good combat pool is very, very strong. And maybe there's the Toreador Bleeders deck in there. But I think, or either Bleeders or Voters deck. But I think the problem in the Toreador, if I remember correctly, and let me just verify here the right things. Yeah, the Ministry deck, or I'm sorry, the Toreador deck that could exist there does lack one key card that would be important for its discipline spread, which is that they don't have Force. They instead only have Freak Drive as their Fortitude option. Am I missing something? Because from 5th edition newer,
no. I'm not sure.
I looked it up. I don't see it on those two cards. I see Freak Drive under Fortitude. So I think that's going to be their biggest weakness. But again, I'm some of this is speculation, and we don't know, like you said, until we test it. But I do feel like looking at the cards that are there, the Banyu Hakim deck is already really strong and largely comprised in most tournament play of cards that are just from V5 or mostly from V5. And when you take and you trim some of those changes, the deck doesn't really get diminished all that much in terms of its power.
But what I looked up for Portsmouth is not in V5, but still, I think Aching Beauty. So I think there might be a spot where you try to change it off target with Majesty and with Freak Drive because you Walther cap later on, so you could generate some blood.
Yeah, I think.
So I think, again, sure, the more efficient card is not available, but still you can do something with it.
Right. My concern here, well, I agree with that, and I'm willing to acknowledge that, like, yeah, me thinking about what they're missing is the bad strategy. When I look at some of the other clans that do exist in the format, it does feel a little bit lacking. I don't feel like the Gangrel have enough to be competitive. I feel like the Malks feel like they should, but it feels a little bit rocky there, and I stand to say that I could just be very wrong. I feel like the current Ventrue array is abysmal, but I mean, I don't. That's one I feel the most solid about. I feel like you really can't play V5 Ventrue. I feel like they don't have a good archetype for functioning, but I really mostly worry just that the Banyu deck is just too strong with the cards that there are and the way that there is like not enough contestation point to sort of limit the deck. But it does still matter that I haven't played it. I'm saying a lot of this stuff without giving it a try. And I feel like a lot of people right now, part of the reason why I'm glad we're having this conversation and I'm not trying to be dismissive, is I think that the dismissive attitude is one that we in the VTest community, all of us that have been around for a long time, you'll notice in the Discord, you'll notice if you go on the forums, you'll notice if you, hell, even on the Reddit sometimes, you'll get this like very, no, it's not that way because X card exists, or because Y card exists, or because this is this way. And it's like, guys, no, we need to think about this in a fashion that is like, one, more conducive to new players, two, proves that we actually do have open minds and not just completely closed off ones, and three, we need to look at things more realistically, because just saying that something exists in the vacuum doesn't mean that it is the thing that solves the problem. You know, I might have a mop and not like a rag, and I could clean my counters with the mop, but it's not a good idea, right? And I feel like this is what a lot of people do in VTest when we bring up the conversation of V5. The conversation is very much so like, you know, I don't have the thing that I want, or I think that this thing shouldn't be in the format. And other people are like, but it was fine in the other formats. And it's like, yes, but it's a limited format by design. It's to create a new environment, something that is going to be friendly to new players, something that is going to be sort of sealed and balanced.
Yeah, and I think, again, I mean, I try to play V5 mostly, and I think I might have gotten 2 game wins in the whole time I'm playing with you. But still, I feel like, for example, my Nosferatu deck is somewhat even competitive because I forced myself to come up with solutions in a limited edition. I might try some ideas you wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
And I think most of them won't work out.
Now you're speaking my real deck building language, but
yeah, but still, if you don't try, I mean, I forced myself to try. And sometimes there's a slight edge of, okay, it got better. It can survive in a format where we're playing all. There might be something in it you don't see because, you just have the higher card pool. You can choose and not explore all options.
Right. This is the reason that for a lot of professional players in Magic, draft was a format that they would regularly participate in. The idea is that by limiting yourself to a selection of cards that you don't play with a lot, you may end up discovering ways to win a game that you might not otherwise think about, or pathways to winning the game that you might not otherwise think about, because you're immediately jumping to, well, I'm just going to play the absolute most powerful card, and I only have access to this other powerful card as well, and they only have access to this card. But when you play draft, you're in a format that, like, your card is only as powerful as what somebody else might have happened to have got. And sometimes if you're thinking like, I'm going to pick this card because it always beats this card in the pool, that card may never show up in the pool, and you just have this card that is like doing nothing. So I think when you do put yourself in that situation, like what you're doing, challenging yourself to play with a limited card pool against a sometimes unknown array of cards to come, you challenge yourself to play the deck itself better instead of trying to like beat the meta game in order to try and win. And I think that is a really good thing to do. I think that is very experiential for a player. And I think you're leveling up well to blend those two words together.
Yeah, I think, for example, just what I came up with is for my Mark bleed deck, Slaughtering the Herd on Superior, which is like everybody I've spoken to, which not limited himself to this card pool, won't say, okay, why would you play even that card? You can play Jake Washington, you can play whatever. And I feel like, okay, I wouldn't have Jake. I might have Life in the City, but there are not so many ways to generate blood. I'm running low on blood if I'm playing Gaon and Conditioning, and maybe even Elder Impersonation for one action. So this is half of or a third of the vampire's capacity. So I do need to come up with some solution for that. And I think this is something,
in V5,
might work. In V5, which might work out or not. But it is an option worth pursuing in the format.
I don't disagree, and I even agree to some degree outside of the format itself. So if we just real quick talk about what Slaughtering the Herd does, it's a card that it's a dominate master or dominate action, no stealth, that you try to put on a vampire controlled by your predator, and each time they do something, you take a blood from that vampire and you put it on the currently acting vampire, and they can burn it by burning 4 pool during their minion phase, or if that vampire happens to leave the ready region. This is a card that I think it's interesting that you're playing this card in that deck from the V5 perspective, especially because I think in V5, this card actually fits a nice niche. But I think even outside of V5, this is like a very overlooked card in a very specific style of deck. To me, we have this. There's a conversation to be had about this at another time, but I want to at least throw my personal opinion out there. I think that we often forget how incremental sometimes the game is, and how much like a lot of combat players always focus on, like, I need to torporize a vampire, I need to diablerize a vampire, I need to burn a vampire. But these are like inefficient strategies to winning the game, and they ultimately break the table dynamic, right? But a card like this does what you want. It is a speed bump for your predator, one where they may not want to nuke 4 blood from their vampire, because now they're going to be 2 turns back on trying to like put pressure forward and maybe be too weak against whoever their predator is. So they might just say, look, if I lose the 4 blood over a series of turns, I can maybe negotiate my way around that. You know, this is the kind of card that in our existing meta and the way that we talk about the game, I think just gets overlooked because we aren't obligated to see like, what can this card do when we put it in action? We just spend a lot of time thinking about like, what are the circumstances where we're not going to get to use this card, where we're not going to successfully put it on a vampire, or where they're just going to burn the 4 blood because they have a Jake Washington, or because they have like a hunting ground that makes this card utterly irrelevant, or where there are like the quote unquote better cards to fit the slot. But I think that this is the kind of, especially like with the promotion of V5, this gives us a unique opportunity to sort of try to play and try to test out these cards that like we assume aren't as functional, and maybe discover that like it's just been our limited viewpoints that have kept us in that hole. So I'm with you on this one. I think this is a great example of a card.
Yeah, and then again, I just ask myself, okay, BCP put this card in the deck for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be sad if it would be otherwise. The decks are well thought, well built. So what do you see in the cards they put in there, which I can't see yet? For example, we don't play as much allies in our playgroup. Is it really the +2 bleed which allies can block? Or is it maybe the other way around for Sovereign? And I think looking as a mark for defensive option against a predator, you just like maybe Secret Haven, maybe Combat Ends, but then you can get grappled. So it was at least some defense could be out there. And yeah, but we stray a bit off from the topic, but still.
Yeah, I think your point is worth making there, though, because there are a lot of things that have not been explored within the format, and there are a lot of things worth testing, and it doesn't feel like right now anybody is testing it. One, because everybody says it's an unfinished format, so why do it? Even myself, you can go back through the text of one of the things in a Discord conversation, or it's probably recorded on one of my videos where I argue that like it's not a finished format. But here's the thing, like there is a playtesting league. I'm well aware that there's a playtesting league, but they're not necessarily testing for a V5 format, and there's only so many people in it. And they're also testing the actual cards that are going to be new that come into it. It's sort of our responsibility, or somebody's responsibility, to try out this V5 format, or this V5 plus format. Let's just keep calling it V5, and see like what it can do. So while I know that in a previous conversation, I disagree with you about the V5 thing. The more I spent time thinking about it, the more I realized, like, no, there is a future for this. BCP confirmed passively as fuck that this format was going to exist, but they still confirmed it. And it was like, well, if I'm on the fence and thinking maybe, and they're willing to say yes, then I think it's time to actually like bring this to the table and say like, hey guys, let's run this through its paces and see what happens. So I think in the long run, I would like to try to, at least once a month, set ourselves up with a game of V5 only and see what adapts from there. Because I think it's worth testing.
And I think another point you made, and I think a lot of people are making in the Discord, is it's not finished yet. But then again, it is a growing format. When should we ever be finished? Or when would be the point that you say, okay, I still have like 4,000 cards, and is it playable and is it finished when they all got reprinted, or is it when the card pool is the size of X? When's that point? I feel like this is something about my person as well. Like, you can argue about not the way it is and you are missing stuff, or you can try to say, okay, this is what we have, and when something new comes, we can adapt to it, like just going forward instead of looking.
I am at a point where I agree with the latter there, that it is very important to try to engage with it, try to see where it could go, and maybe even if enough people got on board with this, be like the engine for helping determine what the format needs. Because I don't want to leave it to just a small group of playtesters to make that determination. And I don't want to wait until we reach a point where it's already too late and we have to figure out what broke from what we've released in the format that is creating a severe problem. And with how long it takes to deal with certain obvious problems that have been problems for well over a year, I can't imagine how much longer it would take to get fixed a problem that exists in a individual V5 format to finally see something roll around that like not very many people are playing. So I am entirely in agreement. You have like really pushed my mind in a direction that I didn't expect from the first time that we discussed this, because I was aggressively stuck in my position of like, I'm not moving. But as I like to remind people, like, I always argue from a very staunch perspective. I spent a couple of years in debate. I had a very argumentative family. I am exceptionally good at digging myself into the ground and making people feel like I am immovable. But if you come back to me and talk to me about it 3 weeks from certain perspectives, I will sometimes give you a whole different opinion on where I think it was and defend it like it was the hill I needed to die on. I feel like I'm here now. I feel like you've kind of helped push my perspective the other way. And seeing you endure it and seeing like how much you're enjoying the challenge of it really also pushes that. And it triggers a part of me that says like, I really like weird random challenges, as evidenced by the decks I build, and this would be one of them.
And actually you gave the push for trying to stuck to V5, because if you remember our very first discussion, like the very first game I played, we were talking afterwards about that I wanted to use Banishment with Alexander, because I think Banishment would be a nice addition, but again, we don't have it in V5.
Right.
Because, and okay, you want to change all our playing styles that you can play this card. And it was true. So I would have loved to play that card in V5. But again, it wouldn't have made any sense to play it in the Mark deck compared to play it right now, because you don't play V5. Alexander is not going to be the older vampire that often.
Yeah.
So no point. So I had to figure another way out.
Yeah, I think you've done a very good job with it. I appreciate sort of finding out that indirectly I have helped push the V5 thing, so it's come full circle in a very weird kind of way. Yeah, so I think this is good. I think in a lot of ways, I am excited about the premise of doing this. I think that I want more people to get on board with this. I have been in the works in the background talking about wanting to run events. I do at some point want to try doing a V5 event. I do in the future have other ideas for events that hopefully we'll be able to run. But in the meantime, I think that what we're planning to do as a group to test out a few of these like V5 only games and try to make it so that we don't have to worry as much about contesting vampires at the very least is going to really give us a good show. And well, I agree with the argument that contesting is a scary thing in V5. Absolutely. There are a very small pool of vampires, and it's very easy to end up in a terrible situation where one person puts out their 8 cap and the other person is like at 7 blood on their 8 cap and has to turn around and undo the whole situation. I think that these are things that we're not going to find out until like we start doing the testing and seeing how consistently these numbers are a problem. And then we can try to figure out like, well, what fills in the gaps? Because at the end of the day, this is a problem we're going to run into either way. BCP has gone on the record as saying we are encouraging the idea of a V5, or we are looking to the idea of a V5 format. And so there's no sense in us not talking about it, not trying it, not moving in that direction in a rational and experimental.
And I think, again, it might be less of an issue. I mean, for vampires, get why it isn't. And I also see it as something which might occur. But still, for the Mercs, you can choose 2 deck types right now.
Mm-hmm.
You can choose Stealth Fleet, or you can choose somewhat Worlds built in.
Mm-hmm.
And then the choices of your vampires becomes different. So you might play, for example, Alexander might not play him a Stealth Fleet deck, but rather Abraham, and vice versa. So yeah, maybe Jason, he's a nice vampire. He will get then again, Andy or Donnie, which have to be in a vote deck, maybe won't appear. I don't play Donnie in my stealth deck at all. So yeah, maybe it will work out either way.
I would agree. I think that we'll find out later, but to start, we'll start it off with the more limited way, making sure we're not breaking each other's ability to play to start with, and then we can experiment from there. But yeah, I've enjoyed this little conversation about it. Do you have any other thoughts? I feel like we've covered quite a bit in here. So
yes, we did, and I think we really had a nice discussion, and I'm looking forward to do even more podcasts.
Thank you. I am looking forward to it as well. I just need to get over some of my own stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, this is a lot of fun. Thanks everybody for listening / watching, and yeah, we'll catch you next time. Good night.
Yeah.